Who I got it. I think I've got everybody's name down who's here. Well, good evening. WY7ATH night, February 22. It's Tuesday, 2/22/2022. And tonight's presentation, we're going to basically just give an overview of the club's equipment, what's there. There's not going to be a huge amount of technical information. We'll see where it goes from here. So let me get this slideshow started. Clickety click. Thanks everybody for showing up, and let me get that going. Minimize that so I can see everybody. Share screen. Now I lost Zoom. You guys seeing my slideshow thingy? Okay, cool beans. Well, once again, this is just a brief overview of the club's equipment, where it's at, what it looks like. I didn't know the technical abilities or background of anybody who might be here, so some of you are going to find this extremely boring, and I'll do my best to not make it that. The club has 4 active repeaters. Let's go on. And for those, I mean, there's a picture of what a repeater is and what it does. It extends your range to talk to somebody else in a different locale, handheld to mobile, mobile to mobile, whatever. City A, City B. Best example of that, of course, is the one up on Pilot Hill, where we can talk to the folks in Laramie from handhelds to each other. Where are they located? Can I get this thing out of the way? Yes, I can. I can drag it right at the other screen. Now I can see. The primary repeater is at Fox Farm and Durr, behind the firehouse there, what used to be the Holiday Inn area, the 146775. And its primary purpose in life was to provide coverage for the downtown Cheyenne area. When I first assumed responsibilities for taking care of some of the club's equipment, this repeater was a Spectrum crystal-controlled rack-mounted repeater. The duplexer that they had in service was relatively new at the time, and it is a Wacom duplexer. It was one of the better duplexers we had. The other machines had homebrew stuff. And it was located at the time in the elevator room on top of the Burke building, the old folks home by the library. And like I say, its primary function was to cover downtown for the parades and all that sort of thing. So the next repeater that the club has is over at Pilot Hill in Laramie, 146A2, originally put together by the Wyoming Amateur Repeater Society, WARS, and it was a GE Master Pro tube type radio. And I honestly don't remember what the duplexer was. In the middle 90s, we replaced it with one of the ones that came from the Air Force. Peterson Farms, also known as Hillside Farms, is about a mile east of Albin on the hill, just outside of town, and it provides coverage into Nebraska. Just in the last, 10 or 15 years, it was a standalone repeater. Originally made, Dale Putnam was one of the that put it together. It was made with a couple of Micor mobiles. And part of the requirement in the bylaws to provide a quote for equipment was a result of that construction. We bought a big power supply, and it didn't float well in the punch bowl. But anyway, the 165's out there at Peterson Farms. Mike Peterson is the owner of the property. And last but not least, North Park, the 105, which originally was actually at Fox Farm and Durr, because 775 was down on by the library, is now out on North Park, Horse Creek Road. And it was made up of 2 Harris mobiles, and the duplexer was made out of 3-inch copper water pipe. It worked okay. Wasn't fancy, but you do with what you got. Bob Rule was one of the people I know that was involved in that construction, and most of that's all BG before Greg. So there's the history. So those are the primary repeaters that are in service every day. And there's one more that probably most everybody didn't know about. We have a VHF spare, programmable spare, so that if one of these things dies, all we got to do is plug it into a computer, put the frequencies in, carry it up there, unscrew the duplexer, hook up the backup, and haul the defective equipment down for repair. Now, there's no link. It's just, it would become a standalone repeater again. But it's good to have. So that's the club's cadre of equipment not located in somebody's garage. So what's a repeater? Everybody's got a license here, and you should know that as a receiver, what comes in goes out. Comes in on frequency A, goes out on frequency B. Two antennas, they hook them together. You can't get any simpler to that. Unfortunately, that configuration has some speed bumps to it. Takes up two antennas. That's tower space plus interference. You need a significant amount of vertical separation on a tower to run a separate transmit and receive antenna, just to keep them from interfering with each other. You got to have some way to key it. And if it gets stuck, you got to have some way to shut it off, a timeout timer. And there's nothing more than talking too long and timing out getting a nice label on your name. Needs to identify itself. And should you want to control a third receiver, well, now you got a conglomeration of wires and interconnects, and you have the Bob Rule plastic bag and bread bags for waterproofing and stuff like that. And trying to get the audio adjustments from one to the other is also a problem. So it's not as simple as obvious drawing. So the first solution, which has come up in some club meetings recently, is the requirement for a duplexer. And that solves the antenna problem, requiring two antennas or tower space. And according to Captain Webster, you can read that for yourself, it's a 2-for-1 deal. And Arnie's going to tell me that the drawing is not a duplexer, but hopefully nobody else knows that. It's a circulator, right? But anyway, you get the idea that the duplexer allows you to use one antenna for a transmitter or receiver. Simultaneously is the key. Here's our duplexers. As you saw in the pictures we were putzing around with before the presentation got started, the one on the left, the Sinclair Q222, is out at Albin. And of the three that you see, it has the weakest specifications as far as isolation. The Wacom WP641 is the one that's been in existence since I got here, out at the 775. You'll notice, like in the middle of the duplexers, you can see those shafts hanging down. That's a brass or silver, I guess it's a brass sleeve. And then there's a phenolic shaft that slides in and out to tune the rejection. The knobs on the top are for the pass. The one on the right is the 820 and the 105 machine. Those are Sinclair 202Gs that came from Warren Air Force Base when they swapped out all their missile missile sites, upgraded their radios. And we acquired a half a dozen of those. The Wacom in the middle didn't even have a cabinet. So we took one of the Sinclairs and took the guts out and put the Wacom in it just to give it some physical protection. So those are our three duplexers. So we've taken the two antennas, got rid of those, put one antenna on and got a duplexer. Couple of hook the RF up and we're all done, right? We took care of that problem. We still got a few more to address. They're all taken care of by the Magic controllers. A piece of hardware that goes between the transmitter and receiver and other ancillary equipment and handles all these tasks. So just what is a controller? I call it a traffic cop, for lack of a better term. It routes audio to and from the connected radios, takes care of all the timing, push to talk, hang time, courtesy tones, IDs. It allows us to turn stuff on and off remotely. I already got ID in there twice. You can't ID too much, I guess. It can either provide identification through CW, or in the case of the 775, a synthesized voice. Provides audio level adjustments, something that nobody's not familiar with anymore. Phone interconnect. Before cell phones, club members only got the secret code to activate the phone patch. We can schedule announcements. Please check into the Aries meeting on Sunday night at 7 o'clock on the 105, TGF, et cetera, and other special functions such as weather interface and some other bells and whistles and gee whiz. Now, the controllers that we have, as I mentioned, the 775 is the fancy one. The CAT 1000 is the controller. The WX1000 is the weather receiver, and it has a Pete Brothers Altimeter 800 weather station connected to it. Again, outdated by cell phones. Oh, what's the temperature? What's the wind speed? You don't need to hit the repeater and ask, hey, send enter 53 and tell me where the wind's coming from. And the pictures on the left are the CAT equipment. Those two boxes and that altimeter in the middle 90s set the club back about $1,000. They're no longer available. I'd say they're obsolete, but if they're still working, they ain't obsolete in my book. On the right, the little green board is the Link Communications. They're out of Bozeman, Montana. They're also out of business. Provides the RLC1 controller, which is a little bit simpler than the 775. The bottom right picture, you can see Audio Test Solutions. They bought Linkcom. So the RLC1 is still available. That little black box on the bottom with all the LEDs is really pretty spiffy. It gives you quite a bit of information on what the controller's doing and whether it's got core and whether it's keyed and some other things. Unfortunately, we only have one of those. And I can't remember which site it's at, whether it's not the 8.2. So I don't remember which site that's at. I think it's the 105. But at any rate, the other two sites have the same controller. It's just in our own little blue box, rack-mounted box instead. So that takes care of the rest of the speed bumps are all solved as far as the controller. I don't know what's up next. It's a mystery. Oh, okay. There you go. So we have 4 standalone repeaters. Horse Creek, Albin, Cheyenne, and Laramie. So far, that's all you've seen. And there's a little diagram of what they look like, right? So you got a transmitter and a receiver, and the controller's the traffic cop and directs everything and connects stuff up, and it goes in and out the duplexer to the antenna. Well, if we had a link radio, UHF transceiver, that means it's half duplex. It only transmit or receive, unlike the repeater, which does it simultaneously. And we hook that up to the controller, the traffic cop, and we do that at all the other locations. Now they're all talking to one another. Spiffy, huh? The 105, of course, is still standalone. It has a link. It's the only one that has a VHF link radio. That was an idea that didn't gain a lot of speed some, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 years ago in an effort to try and connect it to the Wheatland group, the Great Plains Amateur Radio Club, GPARC, yeah, up in Wheatland on the 8.8 machine. Unfortunately, RF does not penetrate dirt with great efficiency, and it just, suffice to say, it didn't work. So, okay, here's a picture of the 105 at the 8.2 site. That Wheatland situation I mentioned, we were, and combined with at one point in time, the 105 site out on Horse Creek was suffering severe interference. So in an effort to verify that it was not the equipment, we swapped repeaters. We put the 8.2 at the 105 and the 105 at the 8.2. And the problem stayed at the site, and it's not the equipment. Okay, while we're at the 8.2 site, let me know if does this work? Did it blow up for you guys? you look at the frequency down here, this is the VHF link. So while it was up at Pilot Hill, hey, I wonder if it'll work up here. No, didn't work. Didn't work. So as you can see, there's that blue box. I said the link RLC1 link communications controller is in the box. One cable comes out here and connects to the link radio. The other cable comes out and connects to the Kenwood. And then over here, there's some switches for turning, enabling, disabling, push to talk. This little block diagram on the left, this is actually the 165 site, but three of them are the same. So you have an RLC1 controller, a repeater, a link radio. And the connections between the two are not as difficult as you might think. It's just a matter of understanding the acronyms. The radio, just like any other radio, has a push to talk that comes in and turns the radio on. Audio goes in and out. There's a signal that comes out of the radio that says when it has a receive function, which is CORE, stands for Carrier Operated Relay. Okay. And Kenwood has their own labeling for something called TOR, Tone Operated Relay. So the squelch or core comes out, TOR comes out, it connects to the controller. If the controller hears carrier and tone, it won't come up. And that can be turned on and off remotely. There's some of those ancillary functions. The link port, pretty much identical, except there's no TOR. Just like you'd program your mobile at home on whatever you're programming into it, you could program a CT CSS on your receive, and the radio won't open the speaker unless it hears a carrier and whatever tone you programmed in it. So that's a combined function out of the Alinco DR135, which this is a typo, because if you notice up here, the link frequency is UHF. So this should be a DR435. It's not a VHF radio, but same stuff. And I could be wrong, but my recollection is they're all the same. You go to any site that has a link radio and the green wire is push to talk. The green wire up here is push to talk. Yellow is core, yellow is core. So if you're working on site A, and, well, I take care of the 8.2, so I don't know what you got out to 105. Yeah, you do. It's pretty much the same. So it makes it easy for, if there's responsibilities shared, to help each other out. So that's the 8.2 site with the 105 repeater. It's kind of a strange. Now this diagram is similar, but different. It's the 775, and it has that CAT controller. Same TKR 750 repeater, same Alinco link radio, same color codes. The only difference is there's an extra box in the middle, the weather receiver. So the push to talk and transmit audio that goes out of the repeater is interrupted by the weather receiver. So it flows out of the controller, into the weather receiver, out of the weather receiver, into the repeater. This is what is known as the same receiver, specific area message encoding, I believe. And it's currently programmed for Albany, Platte, and Laramie counties. Tornadoes, flash flood, and I think severe thunderstorm. So you can program this receiver to only respond to specific maladies. I mean, there's no sense replying to a typhoon. We're probably not going to get one. And whether or not we keep that in the future is kind of up to, I guess, the club. I don't know. Do we really care if there's something going on in Platte County? But at any rate, that's what it does. So if it gets a weather alert, a warning, or a watch, I think it's just warnings. It doesn't do watches. It's all programmed. It'll interrupt the repeater and actually play the NOAA weather radio receiver audio right out the repeater. Again, it's kind of redundant with everybody's cell phone who's got weather alerts on it. So
Yeah, and it does that in the middle of a net. Even if we're in net operation, it will. If you're transmitting, it will come in and knock you off the air, and it'll transmit that. So there's some things maybe we need to think about
change.
that.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
I think some of that might be just the proper codes, and I'm not sure what they are anymore.
right.
Uh, but at any rate, the only other addition was since this link radio gets the most use, I put a fan on it. So whenever the repeater's keyed, it turns the fan on. It also has a power failure relay, uh, which I don't remember the codes used to be able to simulate that too. And so when there's a power failure, it'll switch over to battery backup. It changes the courtesy tone to a CW letter B to know, it lets you know that it's on battery. And it also shuts off the link with the theory that we're running on batteries. Let's not talk to Albin and Pilot Hill. Let's conserve so we can keep our stuff in town. Again, all to be determined by the powers that be. What's left? Okay, here's some pictures of the equipment. We'll kind of breeze through these. We have 4 of these Kenwood repeaters. They were purchased out of Fort Collins. I don't know the date. I'm going to say 99, 2000.
Yeah, it was during.
No.
Oh,
19 or 2000.
right.
2019 or 2000, somewhere in there.
Well, it was in there somewhere. We were up at the Sunflower Room when we voted to buy them for the club.
There's what they look like inside, except this, I couldn't find any pictures in my files. This is a picture off the internet, a Chinese little power supply in here. If you had purchased these in a UHF mode, there would be a duplexer and a power supply in this empty hole. With VHF, there's no room for a duplexer. You've seen the size of them. So that's the Kenwood repeater. This is the ICOM spare. It's basically 2 mobiles jammed in a box. And there they are. There's 2 mobiles, fan, power supply, little tiny built-in controller. And this is a Arduino Nano IDER, courtesy tone IDER. So what can you guys do to help? Especially those of you who are new to this environment. The biggest thing you do is listen. Somebody needs to monitor these. We just had a complaint, 2 weeks ago. Steve came in and said he thought he heard a hum. Well, I've heard other people besides me try to, hey, you hear anything? No, I don't hear anything. So don't know. But that's the kind of thing that needs to be monitored. It'll help isolate interference. And if you're monitoring the repeater, there's codes that are public knowledge. For example, the system comes up and it's blasting noise. If you enter 5000, 5000 on the 8.2 machine, it'll disconnect the 8.2 from the system. If you enter 5001, it'll reconnect the 8.2 to the link system. Now, there's a stumbling block there in the fact that unless you know a little bit about Morse code, you don't know if it's on or off. Because if you enter 5000, it'll send back in Morse code, link off. You enter 5001, it sends back in Morse code, link on. Same story, identical with Albin. Same tones, same codes, same reply. Now, the 775 is a fancy controller. It'll respond in voice and say, link on, link off. That's link off, Tom. Annually, my opinion, these are Greg's opinions and Mark Elbow's, everybody's got at least 2 of them. I'm thinking that we should be doing an annual site visit at least once a year, checking the forward and reflected power. Is the antenna good? Is it still there? Test and adjust the audio levels. Some of these tasks are not simple. Some of them are. Receiver sensitivity, check the frequency and deviation of the system. General housekeeping. Oh, we get some time for pictures if we don't run too late. I got some pictures of the Mycore 820 site that the mice destroyed audio boards. Oh. an inventory. There's a requirement in the bylaws to do an inventory. Now, it's kind of somewhat bogus if you think about it, unless somebody's broke into the site and stolen something, which has happened with the 8.2. They busted a block out of the wall. God, that was 100 years ago. They didn't get in, but they did tear up the door pretty bad. So anyway, this is a group of repair people. We were doing work up at the 105 site, which is now the 775 site, Fox Farm and Durr. We took down 2 corner reflectors, and I'm not sure what else we did, but it was just a work party. And there's some folks you haven't seen in a while, especially the one that's dead. Ken Cripps, KI7. Oh, he just got a new call. I can't remember his call. Mike Stugelmeyer, Tom Lee, George Smith, Tom Coles, and Scott Harris. So, that's pretty much an overview. I didn't want to get too technical. We have some follow-up here with a couple of more pieces of information. Arnie's got a short presentation to add, but anybody got questions for me, or did you find it of any value? Was it more than you expected, or did you want more?
I thought it was great, Greg. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great, man. Good.
I think it was good.
Somebody just left. Whatever.
Right.
Okay, well, I know I could put together something else if we know just what it is we'd be interested in talking about. Without having a repeater here and actually doing some tests, I would think that if we can assemble this new technical committee, and perhaps on a Saturday, since it's this direction, I would guess it would be 2 Saturdays. Go west one Saturday and east another Saturday, so that the committee members are at least familiar with it. How do I get in? Who's got the keys? Who do I got to call? And that would be kind of boring stuff to present right here, I think. The one that's the most difficult to access, of course, is the one at Fox Farm and Durr. It's a city site, and they're a little persnickety. And we do have keys out at EMA, and there's a key at the firehouse. But unfortunately, if there's a fire, them guys ain't there. You hope. So unless somebody's got a question, I'm going to turn it over to Arnie, and he could run with what he's got. And then I got more pictures that we can look at if anybody's really interested in that.
Hey, Greg.
Yeah.
Joshua here. Are you recording this? Because I missed the 7 o'clock start, so it wasn't until about 7:15 till I joined.
Yeah, you'll have to stay after school and write on the board, I will not be late 25 times for each repeater.
Oh,
RJ's recording it. Yeah, he is, Josh.
All right, thanks.
It'll be up on the club's YouTube site, I imagine, in a couple days.
Sounds good. I'm going to subscribe to that, so I'll get the notification.
Arnie, it's all urine, pee-pee.
Okay. Let's see if I've got anything that I can bring up on the screen and talk about a couple of things. To follow up on your repeater maintenance visit to each site. The annual thing, I think, is a heck of a good idea. Maybe more frequent at some sites, and as necessary anywhere as we go. So let me go see where my screen sharing is and see if I can bring up something that can be shared. Screen, okay. And now where do I want to go? I am screen sharing, okay. but I have lost myself.
We're seeing your internet browser with post attendee.
Okay, let me see what I need to bring up here. Bear with me for a moment, please. Am I still sharing?
Yes, sir. We got your file browser and ham stuff.
Okie dokie, we're getting closer. How close? There we go, something called repeater info. Do you suppose this is it? Okay, I'm going to talk about a little gadget that anybody going to do work at a repeater site over time will find to be very, very useful little thing to have in your toolbox. And it's called a ISO tee or an isolation tee. And so basically this is it. What you have is a ordinary old UHF tee with the center connector pass through and a side connector pin sticking out. And you have to modify this. Basically, you take a regular tee and grab a hold of this pin and it unthreads from the center pin here and pulls out. Then you get yourself a short screw with the same thread, put it back in here. That holds the center pin in place in here, but does not give you any contact reaching out this side of the tee. And what it's used for is to isolate to 30, 40, 50 dB the signal that goes through the main line from what you're doing out here on the side. So you can be putting quite a bit of power in through here. You can be running a regular 50 ohm lash up between antennas and radios and things like that. And by putting a signal in that is very lightly capacitively coupled to the screw that you put in here, you can make measurements and or inject signals without disturbing the regular 50 ohm system. So where we go from here is a photo of an ISO tee. I've been using this guy for probably, oh my gosh, started using it somewhere back in the very late 70s. Regular old tee. Here's the screw that's holding the center pin in place, but is not long enough to reach out to the, let's see if I can get this guy out of here.
Back up. While you're there,
Yes.
what I did was I unscrewed the center pin that he
Yes.
talked about, took it out,
And everything falls out
and it falls out. I just sawed one half off
of the center pin
of the center pin,
and put it back in.
put it back in. So my continuity is from here to here, and then this side is the ISO tee. Same thing, different methodology.
Right. Same thing. Now, one of the things that you will want to do, and since I can't get myself out of the front of the picture here,
There you go.
yeah. One of the things you'll want to do is label this sucker so that the few times a year that you use it, you know that that's the one you want to use. And you also want to make sure that if you're doing a regular antenna setup or something like that, where you need to split a line or something, you don't try to use the ISO-T as part of the RF circuit, because it ain't going to be a very good piece. So make a big, fat, juicy label on it. Keep it in your toolbox anytime you're going up to a repeater. All right. See, this probably will tell it better. Yeah, there it is. There's the normal T here with the straight through line, and here's the thing with the side pin pulled out and a short screw put in to hold it. As Greg did, he cut it off probably at this point, so he's got 90-degree T here, and then has got a short coupling here. I have to measure that to see, because that looks like it might be quite a ways back. Well, yeah, you have to measure it to see how much coupling you get. You like these things to be running at about 40 dB signal suppression or something like that. Couple of diagrams, regular T diagram with the two female in and male out, or just as a T on a drawing somewhere. Sometimes I've seen the ISO-T drawn with almost like what looks like a coupler, and that's really not a good representation of it. It's not a coupler, because a coupler has some directional characteristics. This is a better characteristic here. Here's your T, and then your isolated port has a capacitor coupling into that thing, and that pretty well shows you what's going on there. Okay. So what do we use the ISO-T for? Well, for making a whole mess of measurements on the repeater. No, not a whole mess, just a couple, but a couple of very critical ones. And one of the most critical ones that you want to make and keep track of is called site desensitization, site desense. And it says, how much is my repeater receiver losing in sensitivity just by being connected to an antenna on this site? And that depends on where the site is. I have seen sites in radio intense areas where there's broadcast stations, along with an awful lot of business band VHF and things like that, where there's almost 20 dB of desense. You start out with a 1/10 of a microvolt radio, and you wind up with a 2 microvolt receiver out of the thing because of the site desense. What the typical repeater, of course, is, as Greg also drew it out, repeater antenna goes through some network of cavities to the transmitter of a radio. The receiver goes through another set of cavities that are tuned differently to the receiver of the radio, and then these are connected through a connector and all that. To set up for site desense measurement, what you want to do is hook up the antenna to the receiver, but in the receiver leg, you put your ISO-T, so that the signal goes through the T at normal strength, but you've got a place where you can inject the signal from a signal generator, for example, from a good attenuator, wide range, reasonably well calibrated attenuator, into this side leg and measure the influence of what the outside antenna does to the receiver. For example, when you go to make a desense measurement, you just hook the antenna up here, adjust the sig generator until you get what is called a reference level that you're working with, and that's an arbitrary level that you get to choose. It can be 20 dB quieting, which used to be the kind of the old standard back in the old days. And a lot of good techs could tell 20 dB within 1 or 2 dB by ear alone. Nowadays, it's all done with meters. It's called SINAD, signal, noise, and distortion. And you put in a modulated signal and you measure it and get your target is something called 12 dB SINAD. So in other words, signal plus noise plus distortion is 12 dB above the noise floor of the receiver, and that's a usable, readable signal. Anyway, that's, you use a reference signal when you're doing this sort of thing. What I do for a reference signal instead of all of this measurement stuff is I will fix the squelch at a setting that feels reasonable, just a regular squelch setting, and don't touch the squelch after that point. Put in a little bit of tone on the signal generator, and then as you drop the signal level higher or lower, when the signal finally gets down to the squelch point, it drops out, and it'll drop out within 1 or 2 dB of signal injection. So you get a pretty decent indication for your reference level. And then if you don't touch the squelch as you go through and make other measurements, you can refer to that signal level that you started out with. So basically, you have the antenna connected to the receiver. The receiver is hearing sight noise. You turn the signal generator on frequency, and run the attenuator down until the squelch just comes and goes, comes and breaks, and record the level of the attenuator on the signal generator at that point. Then just all you do is disconnect the sight antenna from the duplexer, put a 50 ohm terminator on in place of the antenna, and measure that again. And this time what you're doing is you're measuring what the receiver sensitivity or actual receive capability is without the sight noise coming in and desensitizing the receiver. And you adjust the attenuator on the receiver. And again, where your squelch comes and goes, where your breakpoint, that will wind up being, I don't know, anywhere from 4 or 5 dB to, like I said, I've seen over 20 dB at really noisy industrial sites. So, but that is called the sight desense measurement. It's very critical to know whether your receive antenna, your repeater antenna, is in the best possible location. Sometimes it's worthwhile moving that up or down the tower or over to another tower to see if you just happen to be in a hot spot and get away from it. The value of this thing is if you log the dB desense that you measure over a period of time, you'll see changes occurring on site. Somebody adds another couple of repeaters there, you'll see small changes. Somebody adds a broadcast station or a paging station, my gosh, everything goes out the window. So the ISO-T is the key element for making these isolated measurements on the system. There's also a set of measurements you can make that requires full dummy load that looks at the leakage, RF leakage within the duplexer itself, and how much we're desensitizing the receiver based on the transmitter being keyed within the repeater. And that tells you whether you really need to do some duplexer work or connector work, or get rid of that cheap coax and put in a good double shielded coax or whatever's necessary. So there's a couple of measurements that are important if done systematically over time that'll monitor the health of your repeater. Okay, what else we got here? Oh, okay. Here's an old signal generator, but it's got a really good attenuator. And one of the things that's nice about it is this thing will go from 0 dBm, from 1 full milliwatt down to minus 110 dBm. So this covers the full range, whether you've got a 30 dB isolator or a 60 dB isolator. This thing will still show you differences there. This is, typical of old test equipment, readily available if you go looking for it. And if you're going to look for that, be careful of a lot of the new solid state test equipment has very limited range of output levels. Some may not be sufficient to really drive an ISO-T in the system properly. Okay, anything else? Yeah, here's something I just found from another site. And this is what some people, either commercial or possibly hams, are doing, is they've got a system for making measurements. And if you go through this sheet here, see the measurements they're making and things like that. Other than making the power and SWR measurements that Greg mentioned earlier, this is basically a site noise receiver desense set of measurements that they make periodically in time for the repeater logs, so that you've got history in keeping track of how your system is performing over time, and you can catch degradation in the system by using something like this. So this is probably the most quote unquote complicated part of making measurements, because of the ISO-T and the fact that you're actually looking at several different levels at the same point, operated through hello, aren't you cute? Well, okay, you're cute. So any questions, any comments, any thoughts, any further directions we want to look at just making measurements and the ISO-T? My friend, the ISO-T, like I say, had that thing for since the very late 70s.
So Arnie, you're basically looking for trends. It's kind of like a blood pressure. If I take somebody's blood pressure,
yeah.
unless it's dramatically bad,
Right.
what I'm looking for is trends. What's it doing in 15 minutes?
Just for grins, I measured the thing here when I was looking for the easiest to use reference level to make measurements on the receiver here. At the house here, I'm quiet. I've got just over 4 dB of site desense here. Just the fact that my receiver is connected to an antenna rather than a 50 ohm load means that there's enough noise out there to desense the receiver by 4 dB, which is less than 1 S unit. And we throw away an S unit on ham radio all the time.
Right. And that's something that we deal with satellites as well, because you're using the same antenna for 2 different bands, and sometimes we'll have trouble with that. So cool. Thank you.
Yep. So anyway, that's the thing is, if anybody wants to really get into this repeater maintenance business, you'll probably find that an ISO-T is a handy device to have. It lets you make some measurements easily that without it would be almost impossible. And you can use very, very simple test equipment with the ISOT and get good usable results.
Some of the manufacturers, Bird, Tourmaline, you can buy watt meters that have a 40 or 50 dB port on the side of the watt meter built right in. So you can do your forward reflected power and just use it as an injector. ISOTs really, in my opinion, the homemade thing is easier to move around. It's easier to insert at different points than the watt meter. However, maybe a watt meter with an ISOT would be a good investment for the club.
Yeah. I don't know whether you can see this. This is a Bird through line element. And what it has up here, instead of the watt meter slug, it has a isolating pickoff, signal pickoff. And this could serve as an ISOT also. Much more cumbersome than just the regular old T. Yeah, like Greg had there. Hold up your ISOT, Greg. Yeah, thank you.
Mine's painted yellow.
Well, as long as you know why it's painted yellow and you don't try to, run 50 or 100 watts through it on some other application.
There's a reason why all his stuff is painted yellow, and I'll let you know that there was many times when the toolboxes got mixed up. So the yellow handles, oh, that's Greg.
Okay.
I was looking a cursory review, and 17 pages later, I still haven't found where you can procure one of these handy dandy little things. Where do we go looking, or where do we make one?
Mr. Google is your friend. Go out there and I type in RF ISOT. There's ISOT term is used for a bunch of T-shirts and other junk. Also,
yeah, that's what I'm coming up with.
But type in RF ISOT, and Pasternak and some of the other connector people will be happy to sell you one for $100.
Yeah, or you just get a $6 regular UHFT and a hacksaw or a screw.
That's
Yeah.
it.
If anybody needs any machine screws, I got a whole box of them. I got you hooked up.
Well, there's lots of ways we can go with this, depending upon, as I mentioned, the technical committee is not even a required committee by the bylaws. It's appointed by the president at his or her discretion. So this whole project could change from year to year. But I got a feeling if we can get something established, it's pretty hard to change what's happening. It's easy to start from scratch because you do whatever you want. But whether or not stuff should be procured or test equipment or tools or what the club wants to do or how many people to assign. The hard part's getting folks to volunteer. And those of you that showed up, I appreciate that and hope that you'll continue to participate and run some of these deals. Even if it's just sitting at home and listening and calling the guy who has the tech hat, whoever that happens to be, and say, hey, the 8.2 machine's doing this. Or next time you go up, I want to go with you. I'm supposed to listen to that one. I'd kind of like to see it and go on up there. And once we get elections passed behind us and spring is here and they open up the road, that's another issue with the 8.2. Accessibility to that site is extremely limited. The Forest Service closes off the gate and they get a little ointment and fly in the ointment and ain't too happy with you going up there. Besides that, who the heck wants to lug test equipment for a quarter mile in 2 foot of snow? But anything else you guys want to know, or what do you think? Are you willing to participate in this? I don't know, RJ, you've got the sign up list, and I don't know how many of these folks are on the bandwagon for helping.
Yeah,
Okay.
we got a handful, and I think this is a great start. Like I said, I'll get this up on the club YouTube channel, And I'll send out a link to everybody so you don't have to, because I don't even remember what it's called right now. But I'll send out a link, Joshua. I know you were looking for it out. I'll send you everybody in the club an email, and we'll go from here. And thanks to Greg and Arnie for putting this together. And like you said, good weather is going to be one of the key things going forward, I think. You know,
And,
so
if
about
you-
5-6 months.
If you come up with another topic that's tech committee repeater related, let me know how I can help with that. You know, as you want, oh, how do we do this? I mean, a couple of us could go to a site and film the measurements, and this is how you do descents, site descents, and that might be a good presentation for a club program.
Yep, yep. And having a problem or having an example is always a good way to learn something. So
Yeah, and having, we've got a list of things that the repeater technical committee probably should pay attention to every time they're on site or plan on going on site. You know, there's the frequency and deviation business to verify that everything's still on frequency, that the audio is going through properly, especially when you've got the cross-connect stuff and the stuff we're going into linked repeaters. Linked audio, unless you're careful, you can make it sound pretty grubby.
and the thing that Greg didn't say specifically, but is something that gets lost very easily. Is just good documentation. You know, it's one thing to go measure that on an annual basis, Arnie, but then to have it written down, in something other than crayons, and having it in a place where the next person can find it, and so we've got a Google Drive set up for the group. So hopefully we can have a little bit of continuity and going forward on that. So.
RJ, do you want me to send you a copy of the pictures that I used here in sequence?
That would be wonderful.
I could send you the PowerPoint if you want it.
You know where to put it. You can just
Okay, put it in there. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else?
I'm not sure if that was polite. If I know where to put it, I don't know.
Time to stop the recording.
I was just going to say I'm willing to help out where I can. Just as a tech, I'm still very limited with my knowledge, but I can definitely be another body to help out with just kind of whatever. And I'm at the point now where I'm willing to learn. So just let me know how I can contribute.
And anybody that has interest, that's really what we need is interest. I'm an extra, and trust me, that doesn't mean anything. That means I know how to memorize 735 questions. All right, I'm going to stop the audio and